The reason we ended up looking at swathing was because we wanted a higher quality grain product and I wanted higher quality straw. If we wait until the straw is dry enough to direct cut combine, usually the grain is actually almost over dry. We'll have some losses in the field, or we'll have late season weeds starting to come in. I would prefer to swath because it lets me cut them almost 2 weeks earlier than I would direct cut. And so I can swath it, lay it in the ground for 3 or 4 days, and then pick it back up and combine that product. It's already gone through what they call a sweat, so it won't have to be put on air. Usually the crop is more uniform in moisture content. The straw quality is usually a little higher because you've cut it while it was still more, well, there was still a little life left in it, and so it dries down closer to like hay. And so that it holds itself together better as it goes through the combine. It comes out the back end, you've got nice long pieces of straw that bale easily and make really good straw bales and excellent bedding. So I'd like to swath, but in Iowa in July, it rains so much that swathing is really risky. Last year, like I said, we got burned a little bit because we swathed looking at the forecast and the meteorologist missed it by like a day. And instead of having all our grain up and off the field, it rained on my swaths, which made it a real problem to try and get them to dry down enough to combine. We lost grain in the field and it wasn't good. But that happens, that's farming. Nothing's ever perfect. The next field we did, we just direct cut, and that worked okay. But I had to wait longer to direct cut that ground, so then I had late season weeds come in. I had my clover underseeding was coming up a lot higher, and so then I had other complications because I had to wait longer to direct cut. So each one has pros and cons, and either one of them is perfect. The direct cutting and the swathing, they're both useful depending on what your goal is.
We're direct cutting today. We have done some testing. We did some testing this year with swathing, as well as direct cutting, and we're finding that there's not a lot of difference between the two.
Okay.
But we've seen swathing, if you got more of a weed pressure where there's a lot of green material in there, we want to be able to come in and swath that and lay it down so we're not trying to run so much through the combine. We had some really good, the nice part about swathing is that it allows the grain to dry down more, and then when you're going right into the bin or something, you don't have to wait as long for your crop to mature in the field. You're able to swath it, lay it down for a couple days, come back and harvest it, and it's ready to go in the bin. So that's nice. The oats are clean. You don't have a lot of green material, because the wetter you combine it, if there's some weeds or grass coming through, a lot of that material ends up in the tank, and that ultimately ends up in the bin, and that's just a little more of a management issue. Now if your oats are relatively clean, we like direct cutting. It's simple, it works well.
If you put it in a swath, you're always risking that you're going to have some unexpected bad weather, and your windrow or your swath is going to sit there in some rain and wind and that type of thing. So if everything were perfect and everything was standing just perfectly, I think a lot of us would just as soon use the small grain head on our combine. But if we have conditions where there's a lot of undergrowth in our oats or our small grains, I'm pretty sure we're going to be trying the swather and let that material dry out a little bit before we move it through the combine.
For me, it works so much better to direct cut it than it does to windrow it, because it seems like every time I windrow something, it rains 3 inches on it, and then you can't get it dry underneath the windrow. And then, I've even had it where it started growing underneath the windrow, and I couldn't, because I couldn't combine it, and it just kept raining. Whereas direct cutting, I can, as soon as it gets halfway dry, you can go out and combine,
We're running a draper head here for direct cut. I would say for most, for maybe not everybody, direct cutting will work. We've made the investment in a draper head, which makes the direct cutting process go a lot easier. Typically your old swathers, they were drapers as well. An auger head, which is more typical for soybeans, makes small grain harvesting a little more difficult. So that's a component. The fact that I have a draper head makes what we're doing today a lot simpler because it creates such a uniform and even flow into the combine.
So this spring we were able to locate the machine you're seeing here. This machine is about 20 years old. It has a 21-foot wide cutting platform. It's a pull type rubber belted draper swathing machine. You can it's not self-propelled. You just have to hook it onto a tractor and pull it. If there was one piece of equipment we had this year that we didn't have last year that we couldn't have gotten by without, it would have been this. Our oat harvest would have been very frustrating, I think, without this machine this year.
We windrow all of our small grains ahead of combining. Over the years, we've needed the straw for the livestock operation, so we want to harvest as much straw as we can get. So when you're cutting, we're cutting about 4 to 6 inches off the ground when we windrow. And when you're cutting that low, direct cut, you're getting way too much green stuff to go directly through the combine. But by windrowing, we can let that lay and dry. Mm-hmm. We can go through the combine a lot easier that way. And then if you have any weeds or anything, it's not a problem. You just dry them down and you can run them through.
So with this swathing machine this year, one thing we paid closer attention to was the stubble height that we were laying our windrows on. Last year we had great weather. It really wasn't much of an issue. This year we made sure that we had at least a 6 to 8 inch height on our stubble that we were laying the windrows on, because we knew it seemed to be a wetter season and that we might be dealing with some rain, and we wanted to make sure that we didn't run into any quality problems with either the grain or the straw if it got rained on and we had to let it sit there longer than we wanted to.
We hire our windrowing, and now they've got a 16-foot windrower, and if you've got a good yield, it takes a pretty good combine to handle all that material, because when you direct cut, you just cut below the heads. You're not running all the straw through. So you've got a pretty huge windrow on a 16-foot windrower and the total plant going through. So it's got to be dry. You don't want any wet bunches. We prefer a 12-foot. It dries down a lot better.
Well, what we've done is we've told the customer operator you can't take a full 16-foot swath. I mean, most of them, they have a GPS on it, so they'll just, okay, we'll take a 14. I'll leave 2 foot off on the one end as I'm going. He said that worked a lot better this year. The previous year we'd had them, we just said go for it, and we didn't realize how much material that was going to be, and now we're like, yeah, you guys, just 14 feet. That's about all we can handle. And a lot depends on the height of the crop too, but it's been good straw yields the last few years, so we've had to have them cut less.